The little girl sat on the edge of the worn wooden bench, her small fingers fidgeting nervously. Her eyes kept glancing at the piano in the corner of the tiny community hall, the black and white keys gleaming under the soft light. She had seen it many times before, but today it felt different. Today, she was supposed to perform in front of people who didn't know her, people who might not understand how much music meant to her. Her heart beat fast, and she took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Her family had always been supportive, though they didn't have much. Her mother worked long hours at a local store, and her father fixed broken things for neighbors to earn a little extra money. There was no luxury for piano lessons or fancy instruments, but they had made do. The little girl had started learning on an old piano that had seen better days, the keys sometimes sticking and the pedals squeaking. Yet, to her, it was perfect. Every sound she made on it felt like magic. From a very young age, she loved music. While other children played outside or watched cartoons, she would sit by the piano, her tiny hands exploring melodies she heard in her head. She didn't always understand the rules or the notes at first, but she had a feeling for rhythm and emotion that made her special. When she played, it wasn't just sound. It was her heart speaking, telling stories that words could not capture. The days before the performance had been full of practice and quiet determination. She spent hours repeating pieces, sometimes hitting wrong notes, sometimes forgetting a section, but she never gave up. Her mother would sit nearby, knitting or folding clothes, watching her with pride and worry at the same time. Her father would come home late, exhausted, and still ask to hear her play. They could see how much she loved it, and they wanted her to have a chance, even if the world outside wasn't always kind. The community hall where she was going to perform was small but full of history. It had been a place for local events for years, and its wooden floors creaked under every step. Today, it smelled faintly of old polish and chalk from the school next door. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and the stage was just a raised platform with a curtain at the back. For many children, it was just a hall, but for her, it felt like a grand palace. This was where she could show her music to the world. As she waited backstage, she could hear the buzz of the audience settling in. Some were parents with young children, some were older folks curious about the talent show. The noise made her stomach twist in knots. Her hands were clammy, and she pressed them together to stop them from shaking. She wanted to run back home, to the safety of her room, to the comfort of the old piano where no one could judge her. But she also wanted to step forward even if fear tried to hold her back. A small neighbor boy, who had been watching her practice for weeks, came by and whispered, "You're going to be amazing. Just play like you always do." His words were simple, but they gave her a tiny spark of courage. She nodded, barely able to smile, but feeling a little less afraid. There was something about hearing encouragement from someone who truly believed in her that made the world feel a little lighter. She thought about all the times she had been told she was too small, too young, or too inexperienced. Some adults had laughed when she played at family gatherings or small community events. Some had said music wasn't for children, that she should focus on schoolwork instead. But she didn't care. Music was her world, her escape, her way of expressing feelings she couldn't say out loud. Every note she played told a story, and she wanted people to hear it, even if it was just a few people in a tiny hall. When it was almost her turn, the stage manager peeked out from behind the curtain and called her name. Her heart jumped. She took a deep breath and walked forward. Each step felt heavy, like carrying a bundle of nerves and dreams at the same time. The audience was watching, and she could see some of them whispering, some looking skeptical, some curious. She swallowed hard and tried to focus on the piano, on the keys that had been her friends for so long. Sitting down, she placed her fingers lightly on the keys. The hall was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full of expectation. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, letting the music inside her settle. She remembered the long hours of practice, the moments when she felt frustrated but kept going, the times when her parents encouraged her to continue even when she wanted to give up. All those memories gave her a little more strength. The first note she played was soft and hesitant, but it carried a warmth that only she could make. The sound filled the room, tiny but clear, and she felt herself relax slightly. With each note, her confidence grew. Her fingers moved more freely, the melody taking shape, and the stories she wanted to tell began to flow. She played not for the applause or the recognition, but because she loved it. Because in that moment she was free. Back in the audience, some people were surprised by how focused and expressive the child was. They leaned forward, listening more intently. They could feel the emotions in the music, even if they couldn't name them. There was something pure and honest in the way the little girl played, something that reminded them of the beauty in determination and passion. Even those who had doubted her before couldn't help but notice the skill and emotion she brought to the piano. The little girl didn't notice the audience anymore. She was lost in the music, each note a conversation between her heart and the world. She imagined stories with every chord, painted pictures with every rhythm, and shared feelings that words could never capture. Her small body might have been tense with nerves at first, but now it moved with the flow of the melody, graceful and expressive. The minutes passed like moments, and the piece she had practiced so many times was coming to its end. She didn't think about winning or losing, about what people would say, or whether anyone would applaud. She only thought about the music, about the joy it gave her, about the journey that had brought her here. Each note she played was a statement of who she was, and she wanted the world to feel it. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a silence for a heartbeat, followed by a few scattered claps. She opened her eyes and looked up, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and wonder. She had done it. She had faced the stage, the audience, and her own fears, and she had played her heart out. Even though the hall was small, and the applause was soft at first, it felt huge to her. It was a moment she would remember forever, a memory of courage and determination that no one could take away. Her parents rushed to her side afterward, hugging her tightly. They whispered words of pride and love, telling her how proud they were. The little girl smiled, her nerves fading, replaced by a warm glow of happiness. She had stepped out into the world and let her music shine, and that feeling was more powerful than anything else. As she walked off the stage, she realized something important. Music wasn't just about performing or winning. It was about sharing a piece of herself, about expressing feelings and stories in a way that nothing else could. And today she had done that. She had taken a small step into the bigger world, and though she didn't know what challenges lay ahead, she knew she could face them with courage, determination, and music in her heart. The child's small hands hovered over the piano keys, trembling slightly. The bright lights of the stage made her squint, and the murmur of the audience seemed louder than ever. She had taken a deep breath, reminding herself of the hours she had practiced, the long days when her fingers ached, and the late nights her parents had stayed up, encouraging her. She knew she could do it, but the words from a few adults in the crowd made her doubt herself. "Get off the stage," one voice shouted. It was sharp, loud, and full of scorn. The words hit her like a sudden gust of cold wind. She froze, unsure whether she should step back or continue. Her eyes flicked to her parents, who gave her a small nod, their faces calm but filled with pride. Even though the criticism stung, she realized they believed in her, and that gave her a flicker of courage. Some other people in the audience whispered to each other, and a few frowned. The little girl could feel their judgment like a weight pressing down on her tiny shoulders. She wanted to shrink, to disappear into the safety of the hall's shadows. Yet, deep inside, there was a voice telling her not to run away. It reminded her of every time she had practiced alone, of every note she had learned with care and patience. She remembered the feeling of the music flowing through her hands, the way her heart beat in rhythm with every melody. That memory gave her a moment of clarity. She could not let fear steal her music from her. She shifted in her seat, her feet dangling above the floor, and slowly pressed a key. The note rang out, soft and tentative, filling the hall in a gentle echo. The voice that had shouted earlier quieted, replaced by the soft murmur of surprise from the audience. The little girl felt her confidence grow ever so slightly. She could do this. She had done it before even when no one was watching, and she could do it now. The piece she was about to play was one she had written herself, a melody that captured every feeling she had ever experienced. It started slow, almost whispering, then built up into gentle waves, each note carrying her story. She remembered the lonely afternoons when she had felt unsure of herself, the times when others had laughed at her passion, and the moments when her parents had held her hand and told her to believe in herself. Every memory became part of the music, and it flowed naturally from her fingers. As she continued, the audience began to notice her skill. Even those who had been critical at first leaned forward, listening with a new sense of curiosity. The little girl's small body seemed to disappear behind the piano, and it was as if only the music existed in the hall. Her eyes were closed, her brow slightly furrowed in concentration, and each note rang true, clear, and filled with feeling. She had transformed her fear into determination, her nervousness into expression. A few children in the audience watched with wide eyes, marveling at her confidence despite the harsh words. They could feel her emotions through the music, even if they did not understand every note. It was not just a performance. It was a story being told without words. She was speaking directly to their hearts, letting them feel her journey, her courage, and her hope. Backstage, the stage manager watched quietly, impressed by how the little girl had faced the criticism without retreating. He knew it was rare to see such determination in someone so young. The applause that had started small began to grow, and whispers of admiration moved through the audience. People who had been skeptical were beginning to appreciate the effort and passion behind every note. Even the person who had shouted earlier seemed to pause, their expressions softening as they listened. The little girl did not notice the change in the room. She was fully immersed in the music, her fingers dancing across the keys, telling stories of joy, fear, longing, and hope. The piano had become a bridge between her heart and the world, a way to express feelings she could not put into words. She thought about her parents, her small neighbor friend who had encouraged her, and every moment she had spent learning and practicing. They had all led her to this stage, and she wanted to honor that with every note she played. A sudden mistake came, a note that didn't sound right, but she did not stop. She corrected it smoothly, letting the music continue without interruption. The audience held its breath for a moment, then relaxed as the melody returned to its flow. She had learned long ago that mistakes were part of learning, part of life, and part of music. Each wrong note could be fixed, each moment of doubt could be overcome, and each challenge was an opportunity to grow. As the piece progressed, the little girl's confidence soared. Her fingers moved faster, yet with precision, creating a rich tapestry of sound that filled every corner of the hall. The emotion in the music became almost tangible, and people in the audience could feel it in their chest, like a heartbeat that matched the rhythm of the song. She had turned fear into beauty, doubt into melody, and criticism into a personal triumph. Her parents watched with tears in their eyes, proud and amazed at how brave she had been. They could see that she had not only played the piano but had also faced a deeper challenge, the challenge of believing in herself when others tried to put her down. That courage, they knew, would carry her far beyond this small stage. By the end of the piece, the hall was silent for a heartbeat, as if everyone was holding their breath to savor the final note. Then, slowly, applause began to rise. It started as a small ripple and grew into a wave of claps, cheers, and whispers of admiration. Some of the adults who had been critical earlier joined in, unable to ignore the talent and heart of the child before them. The little girl opened her eyes, surprised by the sound, and felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had done it. She had faced the harsh words, overcome her fear, and played her music fully and honestly. After the performance, people came forward to congratulate her. Some offered kind words, others simply smiled, moved by the courage they had witnessed. The little girl felt a mix of exhaustion and elation. She had been scared, but she had not let that stop her. She had learned that standing firm in the face of criticism could lead to moments of beauty and recognition that were worth every anxious second. Walking off the stage, she felt different, stronger somehow. She realized that the world could be harsh, that people might judge or doubt her, but that did not mean she had to listen to them. Her music was her voice, and she had a right to share it. That lesson was more valuable than applause or awards. It was a lesson in courage, in believing in herself, and in trusting that her passion and talent could shine even when others tried to dim it. Her parents hugged her tightly as she returned to them. They told her how proud they were, how brave she had been, and how beautiful her music was. The little girl smiled, her heart still racing from the performance, but also filled with a sense of accomplishment and hope. She had faced the storm of criticism and fear, and she had emerged not only as a talented musician but as a brave child who could stand strong even when the world shouted against her. That day, she learned that music was not just notes and rhythm. It was courage, emotion, and the power to touch people's hearts. Even though she was only 7, she understood that her voice, her talent, and her determination could make a difference. And she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she could face them with the same strength and grace she had shown on that small stage. The little girl had just stepped off the stage, her small fingers still tingling from the vibrations of the piano. The applause still echoed in her ears, a mixture of pride and relief washing over her. She had done it, but now came the quiet moment of reflection, the time when she realized that performing was more than just playing notes. It was sharing a piece of herself, her courage, and her heart. As she walked toward her parents, a wave of curiosity from the audience followed her. People whispered among themselves, pointing out how skilled and brave she had been. Some faces that had frowned during her performance now showed surprise and admiration. Even those who had shouted earlier looked unsettled, as if they hadn't expected such confidence from a child so young. She noticed the shift but didn't let it distract her. She felt her accomplishment quietly, deep inside. Her parents guided her to a quiet corner, away from the crowd, where she could rest and breathe. They hugged her tightly, their pride unmistakable. Her mother whispered, "You were amazing. I've never seen anyone play like that at your age." Her father added, "You showed everyone that courage matters more than fear." The words warmed her heart, making her feel both small and incredibly important at the same time. She realized that the support of her family had been her anchor through every doubt and nervous thought. Even after the performance, her mind kept replaying the critical words shouted from the audience. She had felt a stab of fear and embarrassment when they yelled, but she had chosen to continue. That choice now felt like a victory, a moment that she would remember forever. She understood that criticism would come, that people might doubt her abilities or mock her passion, but she had found a way to rise above it. The music had been her shield and her voice. Later, as the hall began to empty, a few adults approached her. One was an older woman who had been watching quietly from the back. She knelt to the child's level and said, "Don't let anyone tell you that you're too young or not good enough. What you play comes from your heart, and that is more powerful than anything else." The little girl felt tears prick her eyes, but they were not from sadness. They were from understanding. Someone had seen beyond the surface, beyond her age and the stage, and had recognized her courage and talent. Encouraged, the little girl began to think about her future. She remembered the evenings spent practicing alone, the afternoons when she had improvised tunes on the old piano, and the moments when her family had celebrated her small successes. Each memory reinforced her belief that she could pursue her passion, no matter how challenging it might seem. She realized that music was not just a hobby. It was part of who she was, and it had the power to change how she felt and how others felt. As the night progressed, the little girl noticed other children who had performed before her. Some were confident, some nervous, and some had stumbled. She saw in them the same fear she had felt moments earlier, the same uncertainty about stepping into the spotlight. She felt a quiet kinship with them, a shared understanding of what it meant to face an audience for the first time. In that moment, she wished she could tell them all that fear was normal, but it didn't have to stop them. Courage came from moving forward despite it. Back at home, her family celebrated in their usual simple way. Her mother prepared a small meal, and her father sat beside her, listening as she recounted every detail of the performance. She spoke about the critical words, the supportive whispers, the rhythm of the music, and how the notes seemed to flow from her heart rather than her hands. They listened patiently, nodding and smiling, proud not just of her music, but of her resilience and spirit. The little girl began to understand that music had a unique power. It could speak for her when words failed. It could express joy, sadness, or fear, and it could connect people in ways that were unexpected and meaningful. She thought about the faces in the hall, the shift from doubt to admiration, and realized that her music had touched them in ways she hadn't imagined. That realization filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known before. The next few days were filled with quiet reflection and practice. She returned to the piano with renewed determination, eager to explore new melodies and refine her skills. She experimented with different rhythms, played with intensity and softness, and allowed her emotions to guide her fingers. Each session felt like a conversation with herself, a way to understand who she was and what she wanted to share with the world. Music had become more than sound. It was a language of the soul. School days brought new challenges. Some classmates had watched her perform and whispered about her courage. Some were inspired, asking her questions and admiring her talent. Others remained skeptical, not quite understanding the effort and emotion behind her music. The little girl learned to navigate these responses, understanding that not everyone would appreciate or recognize her abilities, but that didn't diminish their value. Her confidence was no longer fragile. It had been tempered by experience. Her parents continued to support her quietly. They found small ways to encourage her growth, whether by helping her practice, attending small recitals, or simply listening when she needed to share her thoughts and feelings. Their guidance was gentle, never pushing her beyond her limits, but always reinforcing the idea that her passion and dedication were worth nurturing. The little girl realized that she had a safe foundation at home, and that safety allowed her to take risks and explore new musical ideas. One evening, as she sat alone at the piano, she reflected on the events of the performance. She thought about the harsh criticism, the encouragement from her neighbor, and the applause that followed her bravery. She realized that every experience, whether positive or negative, had contributed to her growth. Fear and doubt were no longer obstacles to avoid. They were challenges to face and overcome. The music that had once been a comfort had now become a source of empowerment. Her fingers moved over the keys, playing softly at first, then with more confidence and freedom. She imagined herself back on the stage, the lights shining down, the audience watching, and felt a sense of mastery. The notes were no longer just sounds. They were reflections of her journey, a story of courage, resilience, and the quiet strength that had carried her through difficult moments. She realized that the music she created had the power to inspire, to comfort, and to connect with people on a level that words could not. As days turned into weeks, the little girl began to take on new challenges. She joined small local competitions, performed at community events, and shared her music with friends and neighbors. Each performance brought its own fears and doubts, but she faced them with the knowledge that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward despite it. She understood that the journey of a musician was not only about skill but about heart, perseverance, and the willingness to share oneself with others. Through it all, she never lost sight of the initial moment when the harsh words had been shouted from the audience. Instead of allowing them to diminish her spirit, she transformed them into motivation. She learned to use criticism as a tool, to reflect, improve, and grow stronger. Each note she played was infused with not only her talent, but also the lessons she had learned about resilience, courage, and the power of believing in herself. In quiet moments, she thought about the future. She imagined herself continuing to play, to compose, and to inspire others with her music. She understood that there would always be challenges, doubts, and people who might not appreciate her efforts. But she also knew that her music had a purpose, a way of reaching hearts and minds that transcended age, experience, and opinion. That knowledge gave her a profound sense of peace and confidence. By the time she went to bed, she felt a quiet joy that went beyond the simple pleasure of playing the piano. She had faced fear, stood strong in the face of criticism, and discovered a power within herself that she had never known before. Her journey had only just begun, but she felt ready to face the world, her music as both shield and voice. The small stage had become a place of learning, courage, and self-discovery, and she carried that experience with her as she dreamed of future performances, new melodies, and the endless possibilities that awaited her. The next day, the little girl returned to the community hall, not to perform, but to watch others play. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and curiosity, remembering her own performance and how nervous she had been. The hall looked different now, less intimidating and more familiar. The echoes of her piano notes from yesterday still seemed to linger in the air, almost as if they had left a mark on the space. She walked slowly to a seat near the front, her eyes scanning the stage, imagining herself there once again. As she watched the other children perform, she noticed the range of emotions on their faces. Some were confident, some nervous, some clearly afraid. She remembered how she had felt the day before, the rush of fear when harsh words were shouted at her, and the relief when she finally played. She realized that everyone on stage carried their own courage, even if it wasn't always visible. It made her feel a connection with the performers, an unspoken understanding that they were all sharing pieces of themselves through their music. Later in the afternoon, the organizers asked her to come back on stage. They wanted her to demonstrate a few pieces for the younger children and to show them that age and fear did not define talent. She hesitated at first, thinking of the shouting from the audience, but she remembered the courage that had carried her through yesterday. She took a deep breath and walked onto the stage again, this time with a steadier heartbeat and a quiet determination. The lights shone down, and the room seemed to hold its breath. The little girl felt the familiar weight of expectation, but it no longer felt heavy. She approached the piano and pressed the first key. The sound was soft, gentle, yet confident. The audience listened in silence, watching her small hands move with precision and emotion. She played each note with care, remembering how each sound could tell a story and convey feelings without words. As she continued, she noticed the expressions of the audience changing. Parents and children alike leaned forward, captivated by the music. Those who had been skeptical yesterday now watched with admiration. Her melody was no longer just notes on a page. It was a living story that spoke to everyone listening. The little girl felt her confidence grow with each passing moment. She realized that the music had the power to turn doubt into curiosity, skepticism into admiration, and fear into appreciation. Some of the children in the audience began to hum along quietly, unable to resist the emotion in the music. She noticed the sparkle in their eyes, the way they leaned closer to hear every note, and she felt a sense of responsibility. Her music was touching them, inspiring them, and showing them that even a small child could create something powerful and beautiful. That thought filled her with pride and joy, a warmth that spread through her chest and made her fingers move with even more expression. The harsh voice that had shouted yesterday seemed distant now, almost insignificant. She understood that criticism was a part of life, but it did not define her or her music. What mattered was the connection she created, the courage she showed, and the love she poured into every note. She continued to play, letting her emotions guide her hands, allowing the melody to rise and fall like waves, carrying the audience along with her. As she reached the middle of her performance, she felt a surge of freedom. The music seemed to flow naturally, and she no longer thought about the audience or their opinions. She was completely immersed, lost in the rhythm and emotion of the piece. Every note was a reflection of her journey, her challenges, and her triumphs. The little girl realized that music was not about perfection. It was about expression, connection, and the courage to share one's heart. Slowly, she noticed the audience responding more openly. Some clapped softly, others smiled, and a few even whispered words of encouragement. She could feel the energy in the room shift, a wave of appreciation and admiration replacing doubt and skepticism. The little girl felt a thrill of happiness and validation, knowing that her courage and talent were being recognized. She understood that her music had the power to change perceptions, to move people, and to create moments of shared emotion. By the time she finished the piece, the applause was genuine and warm. It started small but grew steadily, filling the hall with a sense of celebration. The little girl opened her eyes and looked at the faces around her, realizing that her music had left an impression. She had not only performed, she had inspired, comforted, and connected with the audience in a way that words could not. The feeling was overwhelming, a mixture of pride, relief, and joy. The organizers approached her afterward, praising her for her bravery and skill. They told her that she had set an example for other children, showing them that determination, courage, and passion mattered more than age or fear. The little girl listened quietly, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. She understood that her journey was just beginning, but she had already learned a valuable lesson, that sharing one's heart through music could touch lives in ways that were profound and lasting. Her parents hugged her tightly, their eyes shining with pride. They had watched her face her fears, overcome criticism, and create something beautiful from her courage and passion. They knew that this moment was not just about a performance, but about the development of character, confidence, and resilience. The little girl felt grateful for their support and for the opportunities that allowed her to grow. Over the next few weeks, she continued to play for friends, neighbors, and small gatherings. Each time, she felt a mixture of nerves and excitement, but she remembered the feeling of empowerment she had experienced on stage. She understood that music was not just about showing skill, but about expressing emotion and connecting with others. Her performances became more confident, more expressive, and more meaningful. The community began to recognize her talent. People who had once doubted her now sought her out to hear her play. Some asked for lessons, inspired by her dedication and courage. Others simply offered words of admiration and encouragement. The little girl realized that her music had the power to influence, inspire, and uplift, and she felt a responsibility to continue sharing it. At home, she practiced with renewed focus and creativity. She experimented with new melodies, tried different rhythms, and allowed her emotions to guide her compositions. Each session was a journey of discovery, helping her understand herself and her potential. The little girl felt that she was not only learning music, but also learning about courage, resilience, and the power of self-expression. As she grew more confident, she began to mentor younger children, sharing her experiences and encouraging them to face their fears. She spoke gently about the importance of believing in oneself, of using mistakes as lessons, and of finding strength in passion and determination. The children listened intently, inspired by someone so young who had overcome fear and criticism through courage and music. The little girl's journey was far from over. She knew that challenges and doubts would come again, that not every performance would be perfect, and that criticism would still exist. But she had learned an invaluable lesson, that courage, determination, and a willingness to share one's heart could overcome fear and transform skepticism into admiration. She understood that her music was more than sound. It was a story, a connection, and a gift. One evening, as she played softly in the quiet of her room, she thought about the faces in the audience, the applause, and the warmth of recognition. She realized that every challenge she had faced, every critical voice, and every moment of fear had contributed to her growth. Her music had become a reflection of her journey, her courage, and her heart. She felt a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment, knowing that she could touch lives and inspire others through her talent and determination. The little girl continued to play, her fingers moving gracefully over the keys, her heart fully immersed in the music. She imagined future performances, new melodies, and the endless possibilities that awaited her. She understood that her journey was ongoing, but she felt ready to face it with courage, passion, and a belief in herself that had been strengthened by every note she had ever played. The little girl had grown in ways she could not have imagined. Months had passed since that day on the stage when someone had shouted, "Get off the stage!" Yet the memory of that moment still lingered, not as a wound, but as a reminder of how far she had come. Each time she sat at the piano, she felt the courage she had found back then flowing through her fingers, giving life to every note she played. It was a sunny afternoon when she was invited to perform at a small-town festival. The event was larger than the community hall performance she had done months ago. Families filled the chairs, children ran around the edges of the stage, and the air smelled of popcorn and fresh grass. The little girl felt a familiar flutter in her chest, a mix of excitement and nervousness. She glanced at her parents, who smiled reassuringly, giving her the silent message that she could do this. They had seen her grow from a small, nervous child into a confident young performer, and they trusted her talent and heart. When it was her turn, she walked onto the stage with her usual quiet determination. The bright sun made the polished piano shine, and the crowd's chatter faded as she took her seat. Her fingers hovered over the keys, and she closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself breathe and remember the journey that had brought her here. She recalled the fear, the doubt, and the harsh words she had faced, and she realized that all those experiences had prepared her for this very moment. She pressed the first key, and the soft, gentle sound echoed across the field. The audience paused, captivated by the purity of her music. With each note, the melody grew, rich and expressive, carrying with it her courage, her hope, and her joy. She was no longer just playing for herself. She was sharing a story with everyone around her. A story of resilience, determination, and the beauty of following one's heart despite fear or criticism. As she played, people began to lean forward, drawn in by the depth of emotion in her music. Some children sat cross-legged near the front, eyes wide with amazement, while adults who had initially been distracted turned to listen intently. The little girl could feel the energy of the crowd shifting, a wave of admiration and respect rising with each note. Her music was connecting people, bridging gaps, and speaking to hearts in a way that words never could. Her confidence grew with every measure, and soon she was completely lost in the music. She no longer thought about her nerves, the audience, or the memories of criticism. All that mattered was the melody flowing from her heart to her hands and into the world. Each note carried her story, her experiences, and her emotions, telling a tale of courage and perseverance that anyone listening could feel. Halfway through her performance, a small boy in the front row stood up and clapped quietly. Others soon followed, and before long, the applause had spread throughout the audience. The little girl smiled, her heart swelling with joy, not because of the claps, but because she realized that her music had reached them, touched them, and inspired them. She had taken her fears, turned them into melody, and shared her heart with the world. That was more than a performance. It was a triumph of spirit and courage. After the piece ended, the audience erupted into cheers and applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, some even wiping tears from their eyes. The little girl opened her eyes, surprised and overwhelmed by the reaction. She had faced fear, criticism, and self-doubt, and yet here she was, celebrated and recognized not just for her skill, but for the bravery and passion she had shown. The moment was overwhelming, and she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The festival organizers came forward, praising her for her talent and courage. They told her that she had inspired not only the children but also the adults in the audience. Her story of resilience, her ability to face criticism and continue to pursue her passion, had become a message of hope and encouragement for everyone present. The little girl felt a quiet pride, understanding that her music had a purpose beyond notes and rhythm. It could uplift, inspire, and bring people together. Backstage, her parents hugged her tightly, their eyes shining with tears of pride. Her mother whispered, "You've grown so much. You've shown everyone what true courage is." Her father added, "Your music has touched hearts today, and that is a gift more valuable than any award." The little girl felt their words deeply, realizing that her journey had been about more than performing. It had been about learning to trust herself, face challenges, and use her passion to create something meaningful. The days following the festival were filled with invitations to play at local schools, community events, and small recitals. Each time she performed, she remembered the lessons she had learned. That fear and criticism were part of life, but they did not define her. That music was a way to connect with people and share her heart, and that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. With each performance, her confidence grew, and so did her understanding of the power of her music. She also began to mentor younger children who were interested in music. She spoke to them about the importance of practice, patience, and believing in oneself. She shared her experiences, telling them about the stage, the criticism she had faced, and how she had turned fear into strength. The children listened eagerly, inspired by her story, and many began to practice with new dedication and excitement. The little girl realized that her journey was not only about her own growth, but also about helping others discover their courage and passion. At home, she continued to practice, exploring new melodies and experimenting with rhythm and expression. Her piano became more than an instrument. It was a companion, a place where she could pour her emotions and creativity. She discovered that music was a language that allowed her to communicate in ways words never could, and she cherished every moment she spent at the keys. Each piece she played was a reflection of her journey, a blend of skill, emotion, and the courage she had cultivated over the months. One quiet evening, she sat at the piano and reflected on how much she had changed. She thought about the moment someone had shouted for her to get off the stage, and she realized how far she had come. That harsh moment had been a turning point, teaching her that fear could be transformed into strength, that criticism could be met with determination, and that passion and courage were more important than any external judgment. She felt gratitude for that experience, knowing it had shaped her into the person she had become. The little girl's journey had not been easy, but it had been transformative. She had faced fear, learned to trust herself, and discovered the power of sharing her heart through music. Her talent had grown, but so had her character, resilience, and understanding of courage. She realized that life would continue to bring challenges, but she was now equipped with the tools to face them: determination, passion, and the belief in herself and her music. As she continued to play, she imagined the future, full of possibilities and opportunities. She dreamed of performing in larger halls, sharing her music with wider audiences, and inspiring more people with her courage and talent. She knew there would be obstacles, doubts, and critics along the way, but she was ready. The little girl had learned that success was not measured by applause alone, but by the courage to face challenges, the dedication to pursue one's passion, and the ability to touch the hearts of others. In that moment, she played not for recognition or reward, but for the love of music itself. She felt free, powerful, and connected to something greater than herself. Every note, every melody, was a testament to her journey, her growth, and her unwavering belief in the importance of following her heart. And as the music filled the room, she knew that this was only the beginning of a lifelong journey, a journey that would continue to inspire, uplift, and bring joy to all who listened.